So we'll start with Nix anyway on shifting right, why architecture is important for everyone.
Okay, cool. So emergent architecture is, it works well with one team, but what ensues as the number of teams grows is a Wild West ecosystem of technologies and approaches which rapidly becomes impossible to manage and support. Now, innovation is a good thing, and in fact, exploring new technologies and their application is often a key market differentiator. But your teams are not independent startups. They aren't working on their own independent business goals, establishing their own commercial agreements. Your teams are all working towards the same goal, the success of your business. And technology fail, there we go. And as a business, you want to manage your costs by optimizing your technology stack. You want to increase your efficiency by developing deeper expertise in key technologies, sharing it across teams, and enabling developers to focus on solving problems in new and creative ways, but doing so through a shared technology vision, toolset, and infrastructure. Think of it like this. You hire a bunch of creative property development teams to build you a luxury mansion. Some choose a modern style with glass, some choose a quirky style with towers and turrets, some are a red brick style, others a country cottage, and so on. Each team believes in what it's building, and what they produce may be a triumph in isolation. But each team is also spending time and effort planning and installing its own plumbing and cabling, building its own foundations. The problems become more subtle as you go. The connecting doors are roughly in the right place, but slightly different sizes, so they have to rebuild them accordingly after the fact. The heating and cooling in the red brick part is all off because it's adjacent to the glass part. The electricity is independent in each part, so home automation becomes complex. And of course, it is likely to look really, really weird. You need the big picture, the materials and approaches and how they will all connect together into a cohesive whole, the architecture, to be designed and managed at a higher level.
So, okay, you finished there. I'm going to have to jump in and stop you, but thanks for that. So that was why architecture needs to be designed up front. But what we're going to now hear from Tony is why that's all not true, and it's better for the developers to take control. So over to you, Tony.
Okay, cool. I'm going to go a bit faster than Nix, and I can't help it. Unlike building a house or a townhouse or planning in product development, you only have a vague sense of what you will end up with. This might be because you've run extensive or maybe not even so extensive user testing, and you've done prototyping and you know what works. You might even realize your idea is awesome, but it's too early. Technology is not there, or perhaps it's even too late and you've missed the boat. This is when you need your team enabled and empowered to make important and architectural decisions. This is especially important in UI heavy or UI oriented products where speed is important, and the need to pivot perhaps several times is highly likely. And even after the initial frenzy, when you've delivered your first sprint or your first iteration and things settle down, there's always a need to manage some tech debt that might have accrued. And you've always got the need to ensure your software evolves with your customers and your systems. And this is when you build, or you try to build, what's called an evolutionary architecture. I call it a sustainable architecture. It has to live on. So one thing I always say to people is that, remember, everything has an architecture, whether you intended it or not. So none of this is about devaluing the craft of the people who were involved in architecture. It's actually about moving the decision-making process closer to the decision points. And that's why having a good set of architectural practices and principles are needed. Shift left isn't about saying we don't need architecture. It's about saying we are all architects to some extent, but we recognize, like most things in life, there are those whose jobs and passion and expertise it is to keep the bar high for everyone, including your customers. And really, the trick is to do both without the millstone of a centralized function that is only occasionally plugged into the product. And I like cheesy straplines. So my cheesy strapline is, you don't know what you don't grow.
Great. Perfect timing, Tony.
Cheap tricks.
So you've heard it now, both options there. So there's the argument that architecture, it's not going to be as robust. It's going to become a Tower of Babylon if everybody's doing their own different bits and pieces. And you have the other argument that you can never get it right up front. It always needs to be evolving. So we're just going to pop a quick poll up on screen now, and just going to ask you to respond. Who do you think was more convincing? So should the teams be responsible for evolutionary architecture? That was Tony's point. Or should upfront architecture is a better approach? And that was Nick's point. So we'll give a few seconds for people to vote. And as I said, please do vote, even if it's not your area. Try get some lively debate going. So give a few more seconds. And Jovi, do you want to share the results? Oh, it was a close one. But we have it that the teams take it. So that's Tony 1, Nick 0 at the moment. But that was great. So now what we're going to do, but it's actually quite a similar but related question, is if we're doing architecture iteratively, and people have said that they prefer that, is it better to do product development iteratively as well, or does it lead to more problems? Do you need to be thinking more upfront about your product development, your holistic product development? So to mix things up, I'm going to ask Tony to give the argument on why, after saying that architecture should be iterative, the product development should not be. So I will hand it over to you, Tony.
Okay, so basically, in order to build a product that meets your current and future needs, as you understand, you need a plan, right? A roadmap is nothing more than a living document that sets a direction of travel. The entire point of it is to help you focus your priorities and delay making decisions. Yes, delay decisions. You don't have to make all the decisions up front. You do have to adopt the principle of not making the wrong decisions too early. It's not the point of a roadmap to commit you to eternally driving the bus at 50 miles an hour, and you're either committed or you die. And I always ask, what would Keanu Reeves do in these situations? And he says, jump off the bus. A roadmap is also not a strategy. Most of us don't have crystal balls, nor do we have the ability to predict the future. What we do have is an intent provided by our metrics to prove it and deliver agreed value. It's a concrete and tangible thing that you have to have when you're dealing with the real world. It's not the pantomime of my gut is better than yours. It's or boardroom posturing. It's just being organized. If you're mapping out the direction of travel and you're recording it as a roadmap with milestones, it makes using mixed cadence teams actually simpler and not harder. And the thing to accept is your cadences are built around specialisms. You have to remember that all product delivery is what I call a pace layering exercise. You have elements of the product that can and will run faster and earlier, in fact, than others. And these typically require a range of disciplines to coordinate at pace, which is always hard because it's humans. And some elements taking the lead, others follow, and then yet some more join in later, and then others leaving at a later stage. And if you think of an orchestra playing, and imagine what would happen if everyone just turned up and did their own thing. That's why Spotify has chaptering guilds. People with expertise perfect the craft, and they work with others to improve the craft, and everyone gets the value. That's it.
Great. Perfect timing once again, Tony. So now we want to hear the alternative argument from Nix. So I will hand it over to you, Nix.
Thank you. So Shift Left is about giving development teams the autonomy to move forward at pace and the trust that comes with it. Of course, we need to provide them with a clear product roadmap, which aligns with our business goals. We want a cohesive and consistent user experience across products built by multiple teams across multiple channels. The question here is whether you constrain or empower these teams. Do you give them blueprints or do you give them scaffolding? Shift Left is clearing the runway and letting the development team take off and soar. We need to allow development teams to be agile, to adapt to change, to innovate, to respond proactively to user feedback and shape their own product. If all of these things come top down, that cycle is very long and convoluted. Feedback is, in fact, a readily available source of qualitative information, right? As near as you're practically going to get to a direct channel between your users and your development teams. Things like GitHub issues, Play Store and App Store reviews, user voice, all provide direct feedback from real world users. The development teams can continuously monitor it, and within the scaffolding of our product roadmap and UX vision, make rapid incremental improvements to the product based on what users actually want. And then they can push this further by using beta channels or early adopter programs to gain early insights into how new features will be received. WhatsApp and Instagram, for example, provide open sign up to users for their beta channels. And use that feedback to shape features' final release rather than rely on quantitative feedback later on, like number of downloads, for example. What this creates ultimately is a short feedback loop with users directly driving improvements, the development team implementing them in small iterations, pushing them out to early adopters, applying that feedback to the final release, all within the boundaries of our scaffolding, but without having to go back and redraw the blueprints every time.
Great, thank you, Nix. Running over again, I might cut off your mic next time.
That was bang on.
Okay, so let's pop up the poll for this one. So I guess just to recap, it's do you do the so with product development, do you think teams should take the full ownership of the product backlog and direction and rely on that feedback and quick iterations that Nix has been talking about? Or do you think that the centralized planning eliminates the duplication of work and wasted dead ends? So that's the Keanu Reeves roadmap that Tony was elaborating on. So do you have it? Is it Nix option 1 or Keanu Reeves in option 2? You can give everybody a few seconds to vote.
It's a wholly unfair comparison.
Party on.
I've been mugged off here.
All right, let's see what the results are so far. Okay, we have, it's not so close anymore. Teams should take ownership of the product backlog and direction. So we're seeing a trend. It's shift left. We have no bias towards the speaker so far. It's definitely a bias towards shift left. But now, one of the bigger challenges that I've often seen teams face is architecture is challenging. It definitely is, but security is something that cannot be compromised on. So security is the one where a lot of people say, okay, look, we can't compromise on security. We have to do the upfront design to make sure that our system is as secure as possible. We don't want to end up in a Zoom situation where we're scrambling to fix security after the fact. So what we're going to talk about is how we manage the shift left and shift right with something as important as, I guess, either platform engineering, which again would be a similar concept, or security, which is critical to get right up front. So I'm going to start with Nix, and he's going to say why shifting right is important for platform and security. So over to you, Nix.
Cool, thank you. So a good engineering team has the potential to do anything. A good software engineer is both logical and creative, practical and innovative. They can pick up new technologies, ideologies and patterns and apply them to business requirements, or the other way around. So they have all this expertise in software development and they're pointing it with laser focus at your business requirements. Awesome. Now, of course, you want to deliver that software through an automated build and release pipeline, right? So they give up a little bit of the space they use for software engineering expertise to accommodate some expertise in platform engineering. Shared variable libraries, templates, release version management, rollbacks, canary strategies, configuration management, the list goes on. They can take all of that in their stride, but where their trajectory was the SpaceX, it's now a little more Top Gun. But we also want our software to be secure. So the team implements secure transport, SSL offload, certificate management, encryption at rest, secure code analysis. They start to learn OWASP, threat modeling. By this point, their trajectory is less Top Gun and more Thomas the Tank Engine. They begin to explain in increasingly exasperated terms that their delivery timelines have grown even though the business requirements haven't changed, that there are only so many hours in the day. Maybe they start quoting Bones from Star Trek. It's the kind of thing we do. There are also more complex and subtle aspects which require much deeper expertise. The team starts to get out of their depth, and to go any further means that they need to shift their primary expertise from software engineering to somewhere else. So it's not as much fun as it was anymore. They aren't doing what they love doing. Maybe they want to go somewhere else they can instead. And what if every team is going through that same thing? Instead, it's better to provide that time and expertise through teams dedicated to it, who can work strategically and efficiently so that the development teams can get back to what they love doing on that steep trajectory that they and your business find so rewarding.
Great. Thank you, Nix. So yeah, we've gone from Keanu Reeves to SpaceX, Top Gun, and Thomas the Tank Engine. But great analogy so far. So what we're going to hear now, though, is the opposite argument from Tony, who's going to argue that we should delegate this responsibility to the teams and why that's important. So over to you, Tony.
Okay. Central teams only work in very limited scenarios. If you think back to my previous mentioning of Spotify, chapters and guilds, the whole idea is that you have experts embedded in teams that bring their collective knowledge to the fore. They work with teams to further their own collective experience and their craft, and they work really well, particularly in the DevOps space. With being able to release early and release often is often an ability all teams need to have. And as activity increases, it's just too much of a tax on speed and agility to have only one or two people able to release. So it absolutely makes sense to empower anyone to do a release with confidence, because it should be that easy. This frees up the DevOps person, the platform engineer, some people call them, to focus on improving the toolings, feedback into the collective DevOps hive mind, and then raise the bar for other teams working in different product areas, so the effort isn't wasted. And in particular with security, the same actually applies, but with one subtle distinction. Often what they're doing is on a much longer cadence. It takes a lot longer for it to sort of mature. And it often requires upskilling teams on some of the eccentricities of secure by design. But most importantly, it really needs a solid product knowledge and product affinity, something that's always lacking in a centralized team. And you need that if you have to take corrective or protective action. And you can't do that if you're sitting in a barbed wire bunker, 400 feet below the building. One other thing that's also rarely mentioned is that recruitment is pretty hard when you have centralized teams. And it's often better to look within your group for people, for recruitments, running grad programs, running training schemes. And it actually you'll discover that there are a lot of people in there who actually are interested in being a security person or a DevOps person. And in many cases, they yield better outcomes than training people, in off the street. I tried to have a COVID-19 reference, but I couldn't get Boris Johnson and shift left to work. So go Jacinta.
Yeah, I think the COVID-19 was a bit random towards the end, but I did like the lack of product knowledge and raising the hive mind. I think they're great examples of the power that a product team can do, but equally, is that where they want to focus, or is that taking the fun out of what they're trying to do? So we'll pop up the question now. So platform engineering and security, is that everybody's responsibility? So that was Tony saying that they're the people with the product knowledge. They can't be stopped from releasing regularly and having to go through hoops. Or is it so hard that it needs dedicated experts? And this is taking away the boring stuff that the teams don't want to have to worry about. So based on the arguments that you heard, which do you think is better? Are autonomous teams SpaceX, or are they more Thomas the Tank Engine? We'll give everybody a few minutes or a few seconds to vote. Okay, so we have a shift away. So we're saying now, when it's something to do with as complex as platform engineering and security, we think that it's better to have dedicated experts. I'd love to actually see if we take that analogy in different areas, like the qualitative research or kind of design system maintenance. Would we still have the dedicated experts are the better approach, or product ops, research ops, etc.
We already run shift left, right on the moving to the teams owning their product. So
yep. But they own their products, but they can't release because they have to go through a centralized security. Okay, so on to our last question, and please do. So we are going to have some time at the end, so please do write in some questions as well, and we'll get Nix and Tony to debate them as well at the end. But our last question now is around build versus buy. So this is a common question that comes up in in a lot of organizations where the core area of innovation is probably in one area, but there's a lot of other things that you need to do right. It could be your CRM system, it could be your ordering system, it could be anything that you need to do to support your business, but your core innovation and what differentiates you is different. So the challenge becomes, do you build all those external pieces as well, so that you have full control and it can be perfectly tailored? Or do you invest the time in your area of expertise and you buy off the shelf products that might not be 100% fit, but they get you 80, 90% there? So we're going to rotate again, and we're going to have Tony is going to start this one, and he's going to argue on the buy option. So over to you, Tony.
Okay, full disclosure, I've done both. I've built and bought e-commerce systems, CMSs, CRMs, forum systems, front-end frameworks. They all have their place. Both approaches will work, but you have to be in the right context. If I really would recommend, big shout out to Simon Wardley. Read anything by Simon Wardley about value chain mapping, because he gives you, it does an amazing job explaining when build might trump or buy might win. So I always use the same analogy. When was the last time anybody decided to, hey, I need a new car. I'm going to build one from scratch. I'm going to go down to B&Q and get some metal and a welder and blah, blah, blah. You're not going to do it, right? You're going to go and you're going to buy it and you're going to get some spec options out of the factory and you're going to drive it and then get another one. Unless you're a Formula One team, but they have very specific needs. So in my opinion, most these days, commercial off-the-shelf systems are very highly configurable as and can be adopted to suit most needs. And what lets them down is often making no real effort to adopt your business process or your requirements to accommodate the unwritten rule, which is the more you bend, the more you bend. Innovation can happen on a COTS system, because nowadays most COTS systems, commercial systems, are headless, and you bring front ends to suit the back ends, and we have strong back end architectures that make that pretty easy. So always make sure you evaluate your systems to make sure how user friendly it is for back office users and for extensibility. And you'll find most systems are cool. One of the other things is talent acquisition. It's much easier when you have a headless system to get people on board. You've just got to avoid those people that sell you a product with no support or no ecosystem. If you've got a good ecosystem, you're fine. So don't buy what your CXO got sold on the golf course. Buy what your engineers and architects have played with and like. Great.
I like the analogy of you don't build a car. And it is true. I've seen a lot, like API first is often a thing that people are promoting. A lot of the configurable products, they're API first. And just for those who don't know, I'll just explain. Headless is where it doesn't have the UI attached, so it just has the back end, and you can build your own UI on top of that. So just some of the audience might not have known that term. But now we've heard why you should buy your products where it makes sense. We're going to hear the opposite argument about why it's always important to build your products, because it gives you the full flexibility that you need. So over to you, Nix.
Okay, so commercial off-the-shelf software offers the benefit of dedicated teams of people and a depth of domain expertise behind it, right? Unlike a car, which everyone is going to buy a car to do roughly the same thing, a commercial off-the-shelf software has to be made so generic and to be able to do everything that any business might want it to do, that so that it can be sold across an entire market. But of course, that means that out of the box, it cannot do what your organization needs it to do. It doesn't support your business because your business is as nuanced as every other, right? What that means is that you need to spend months or often years customizing that software before you actually see any benefit from it. And to do that, you need to bring product and domain expertise into your organization. The market for that kind of specialization is usually fairly niche, so hiring in-house resources is difficult and expensive, and you may not need them around forever. That's almost certainly going to bring you to consultancy services provided by the vendor, which of course forms part of their business model. Not only that, but you have ongoing license support and maintenance costs, which tie you into a long-term dependency on that vendor and the success of their business. Instead, what if you treated this as another product? You could bring in a small pool of domain expertise, use your existing software developers or hire more. Take an agile approach by building small iterations which you release into production through an automated test and release pipeline, which is something you're unlikely to get from a third-party vendor in my experience, and start to reap the benefits from very early on. You can easily adapt to changing and emerging requirements as your business grows continuously and inevitably evolving. So instead of doing it all up front with the big licensing costs and years of development, you could spend considerably less money with less upfront investment for a product which is tailor-made for your business needs and you can benefit from very early on.
Great. So that's we've got the argument that you're going to save time. The products these days, they're very configurable, headless, API first. And you have the argument that you're going to get tied into an organization's support model, which tend to be quite expensive and challenging to deal with on a regular release cadence. So we'll pop up our question then. So in regards to the build versus buy debate, building software gives you the best flexibility. So that was Nick's argument. Or buying software lets you focus on your core area of innovation. So if we can all see whether we want to buy our car or build our car.
As long as you want to buy a car that doesn't do anything and you have to build the bits that you want to do.
I don't know if you're allowed to influence the jury while voting. Okay, we'll see what people have gone for. Buying software lets you focus on the core area of innovation. So we have actually, I have been terrible at keeping score. We had Nix won the first one, Tony the second one, Nix, I think, won the third one.
I think we had two lefts and two rights, didn't we?
Yeah. So we have a tie. No, it was a great debate, though. I really kind of enjoy these things because a lot of the challenges that I have personally from hearing talks is somebody will give one side of an argument and it's hard to hear what the two different sides of the argument are. So I think it's quite good to be able to hear people debate the different options. So if there's any Q&A, or does anybody have any questions? Or while we're waiting for people to type them in, I'm just going to ask you, I know Tony and Nix, you were debating on either side of the argument there. We'll give you a minute each now, I guess. Just Nix, I'll start with you because you're bigger on my screen at the moment. What is your view of kind of this debate? What if you were to sum up, what would you say?
I think for the most part, ultimately, it's a balance, right? And Tony and I both touched on that. It's not about exclusively moving everything into a team or exclusively having everything centralized. It's ultimately about it. One of the points that I made in one of my my sections was it's about whether you constrain a team or empower a team. And you can still have, a center of expertise. You can have central teams. You can buy software in. You can, have security teams that are dedicated to that. But ultimately, it's how you arrange that and the relationships and the working practices that you form, which mean that the teams are empowered to deliver at pace, but they do so by building on the expertise of domain experts, security experts, DevOps experts, and essentially just have a healthy balance between the two.
Great. And over to you, Tony. Do you have anything to wrap up with?
Yeah. I quote Simon Wardley a lot. Sounds like I'm on a kickback from him, but I'm not. One of the things that you come to realize when you do this long enough is that it actually does depend. There are things that you can't buy a product for, right? They're so edgy and out there that you just have to build it. But there are so many things that you really shouldn't be building, because if you're spending time building that thing, you're missing out on the opportunity to build the thing that really matters. And what really matters is what you put in front of your customer. You know, it's all about the product, and for me, it's all about the people. So you need to use people to their best capacity, and let them do what makes them happy. And then that might be building a system, and that's why we have lots of excellent software engineers, you know, in this part of the world. And it's also why you also have very fine people who can build and maintain custom back-end systems, and you can move between the both. You can actually have both in a large project or a large product set, and it's perfectly fine. You just have to understand that one size does not fit all.
Great. And I guess just another question I was thinking of from the audience perspective. So we have a lot of people in product, in UX, in design. Is there any advice that you can give them in trying to help understand how they should interact with the developers, particularly when it comes to this kind of developers taking over the architecture or building, or suggesting ways that how they should communicate to make sure that things run as well and smoothly as possible? So,
yeah,
Nix, do you have your hand there?
I can start. So I think UX, yeah, a lot of effort has gone into doing UX in Agile. I think if you, as I'm sure many UX people have, if you haven't read like Nielsen's kind of 8 levels of maturity of UX, it talks a lot about how you drive those changes, but do so in an agile way, or in an iterative way, or some combination of the two. I mean, you have to you almost have to run UX, you know, a sprint ahead or whatever of your software development team. But ultimately, I mean, it all comes down to that original kind of XP kind of approach, right? Is that you want to have the people that you need right next to you, so that you can talk to them. There are no delays in getting the information you need, or adjusting to changing requirements. So I think, and it's the same with product management. You know, if you have product management in an ivory tower and they're doing stuff and they never talk to the engineering teams, it's a slow process. You know, adapting to change is very, very slow. If you have all of those people talking and having an open dialogue and adjusting as they go in the true sense of an agile team, then it can work very well indeed.
Great. Well, thank you to both Tony and to Nix for that debate. I thought it was quite useful, and I hope the audience did as well. We had a lot of people voting, which is always good to see.